In the small town of Cristobal, Tomas walked along the cobblestone streets, admiring the clear sky with a smile on his face. At just 24 years old, he had achieved a high rank in the military, a source of pride for his parents, a well-known officer father and a retired military nurse mother. They had instilled in him values of discipline and respect, showing him that despite challenges, he could achieve great things. That day, as he was heading home after a day of training, he felt a quiet satisfaction. But his peaceful world was abruptly disrupted by the arrival of Sebastian, a policeman whose reputation was marred by arrogance and prejudice. Sebastian approached Tomas with an accusatory glare, his authoritative tone cutting through the air. "Hey you," he said, standing tall with his chest puffed out. "You look like a thief." Tomas, surprised, looked up at him. "I don't understand, sir. I'm just on my way home." "You're black, and that's enough for me," Sebastian retorted, the contempt in his voice unmistakable. "You're under arrest." As Sebastian grabbed Tomas, he added with a cynical smile, "I bet you don't even know how you got that Rolex watch. Who knows? It might be stolen." Tomas took a deep breath, aware that staying calm was crucial. "Sir, I assure you this watch is mine. I obtained it legally," he said, striving to keep his tone steady despite the rising anxiety. But Sebastian wasn't listening. Instead, he scrutinized Tomas with a mix of disdain and defiance. "How can someone like you afford such an expensive watch?" he sneered, his eyes narrowing as he tried to belittle him. Tomas felt anger welling up inside but remembered the values his parents had taught him. Rather than letting himself be provoked, he chose to speak with dignity. "I received it as a gift for my military achievements. I work hard for what I have." Sebastian, condescending, demanded, "Show me your ID, your military card, anything to prove you're really a soldier." Tomas, despite his growing frustration, understood he had no other choice. He reached into his pocket and handed over his military card. "Here," he said, trying to maintain a neutral tone. Sebastian took the card and flipped through it with visible disdain. After a moment, he looked up at Tomas and sneered. "A soldier wouldn't earn enough to afford a Rolex. And besides, you're black, so you must be corrupt." Sebastian's words hit Tomas like a punch. He couldn't believe the arrogance and ignorance this man displayed. A quiet wave of anger surged within him, but he forced himself to breathe deeply. "I don't need to prove my worth to someone like you," he replied firmly. Sebastian, clearly amused, continued his tirade. "Do you really think anyone will believe that a guy like you, with that face and those plain clothes, could own a luxury watch?" His eyes gleamed with arrogance as though he had uncovered some hidden truth. Tomas, keeping his composure, let the officer carry on with his humiliating speech. He knew any rash reaction could escalate the situation. Sebastian took pleasure in belittling him, convinced of his superiority. What Sebastian didn't know was that a passerby, Colorado, had been discreetly filming the entire scene with her phone. Although the video quality was poor, it captured the tense confrontation, highlighting Sebastian's abusive behavior. "You're just a poor black man," Sebastian continued, savoring his words. "You don't belong here." A quiet anger stirred in Tomas, but he knew the best way to fight back was to remain calm and rational. "You know nothing about me or my struggles," he finally said, his voice steady with quiet determination. "I'm not here to prove anything to you. You can't justify your actions by using the color of my skin against me," he declared firmly. "I deserve respect, just like any other citizen." Sebastian's frustration grew in the face of Tomas's calm confidence. In a fit of rage, he lashed out. "You think you can fool me with your fake humility," he said, stepping closer to Tomas with a cruel look. Without warning, Sebastian struck Tomas with a violent blow to the stomach. Tomas buckled under the impact but refused to give in to the pain. "Don't cross my path again," Sebastian sneered, a sadistic smile on his lips. Tomas, startled, tried to straighten up, but another blow, this time to his face, sent him sprawling to the ground, blood dripping from his lip. "You think it's over?" Sebastian taunted, laughing as he kicked Tomas in the ribs. "You're nothing, you know nothing. Take it, stay twisted, and keep calm. Tomas felt each blow like a surge of injustice, but he remembered his parents' lessons. Dignity was a weapon no one could take from him. He forced himself to remain composed, even as pain coursed through his body. Sebastian, feeling triumphant, finally stopped, relishing the cruel pleasure he derived from dominating his victim. He knelt next to Tomas, looking at him with disdain. "You'll remember this," he muttered, his breath reeking of scorn. "You don't belong here." Colorado, Colorado, the passerby who had recorded everything, stepped forward, holding up her phone. "This video will go viral," she announced. "The world needs to see what you've done." The murmurs in the crowd turned into cries of outrage. Sebastian, realizing his reputation was at stake, turned to flee, but the eyes of the people followed him, and he knew he could never escape this humiliation. Tomas, bolstered by the solidarity of his community, stood tall, determined not to let this incident fade into obscurity. "This is the beginning of change," he declared, looking at the familiar faces around him. "Together, we will fight for justice and equality." That evening, after the confrontation, Tomas returned home deep in thought. The physical pain and humiliation were one thing, but the emotional toll ran much deeper. He knew he needed to talk to his father, a figure of authority and wisdom in his life. The following afternoon, Tomas donned his full military uniform, proudly displaying the hard-earned insignias. The uniform, a symbol of his years of service and sacrifice, also served as a reminder of his dignity and commitment to his values. With a resolute spirit but a heavy heart, he made his way to the family home. His father, General Alejandro Mendoza, was a respected figure both in the community and within the military. Tomas found him in his study, reviewing documents. Seeing his son enter, Alejandro immediately put down the papers and stood up. "Tomas, what's wrong?" Alejandro asked, his eyes widening as he noticed his son's visibly shaken demeanor. "You look troubled." Tomas took a deep breath. "Dad, something terrible happened to me today." He recounted the incident with Sebastian in detail, each word weighing heavily on him. Alejandro listened intently, his expression growing more severe as Tomas described the abuse of power and humiliation he had endured. When his son finished, the general stood and approached him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Tomas, what you experienced is unacceptable," Alejandro said, his voice grave. "And I'm proud of the dignity with which you faced this situation." The general paused, thinking deeply before continuing. "We must fight against this injustice. The video that was recorded is a starting point, but we need to go further. I will contact my colleagues in the military and civil rights organizations. This isn't just your battle. It's one for everyone who has suffered this kind of abuse." Tomas nodded, a weight lifting slightly from his shoulders. "Thank you, Dad. I needed your support." That evening, the video recorded by Colorado began spreading like wildfire across social media. The footage of Sebastian striking Tomas and subjecting him to humiliation captured the public's attention. Posts, shared and commented on en masse, sparked a swift and widespread reaction. Hashtags such as #JusticeForTomas and #EndAbuseOfPower began trending, supported by thousands of outraged individuals. Local and national media, alerted to the online uproar, started covering the story. News channels broadcast excerpts of the video repeatedly, and journalists rushed to interview witnesses, including Colorado, who had become an unexpected spokesperson in the fight against police brutality. Tomas, with the help of his father, General Alejandro Mendoza, and a team of civil rights lawyers, began preparing a legal case. They aimed to ensure the incident wouldn't remain merely a media sensation but would lead to concrete consequences. Sebastian, now under intense scrutiny, found himself at the center of mounting pressure. Calls for his dismissal and a thorough investigation came from civil rights groups, community members, and even political figures. The video had exposed not only his cruelty but also the systemic nature of the problem. By the next morning, newspapers featured damning headlines about Sebastian on their front pages, and television channels continued airing the shocking footage. Online comments reflected a tidal wave of anger and disbelief, with countless people voicing their indignation over the documented abuse of power. Despite its poor quality, Colorado's video had a profound impact. It not only captured Sebastian's brutality but also shed light on the systemic abuses affecting many others. The community, united in its demand for justice, kept up the pressure for necessary reforms to be enacted. Sebastian, overwhelmed by the mounting pressure and the intensity of public outrage, began to mentally unravel. As days passed, guilt and fear over the consequences of his actions steadily consumed him. His public image was now in ruins, and he saw himself as the embodiment of everything criticized about the system he represented. The impact of the video and the relentless calls for his resignation created an oppressive atmosphere around him. Public protests, scathing press articles, and heated discussions on social media grew louder by the day, amplifying his sense of isolation. One evening, as the media continued to report on the scandal, Sebastian found himself alone in his apartment, haunted by the images of the confrontation and the virulent reactions it had sparked. He was engulfed by a mix of shame, despair, and fear for his future. The calls for his removal grew ever louder, and he felt his life and career were irreparably destroyed. Alone with his dark thoughts, Sebastian began considering desperate solutions. The media scrutiny and public backlash left him feeling cornered, unable to see a way out. The weight of his actions and the reality of his situation became increasingly unbearable. The next morning, silence hung over Sebastian's apartment. Concerned neighbors, noticing his prolonged absence and closed shutters, alerted the police. When authorities entered the apartment, they found Sebastian unconscious in a tragic scene. Despite rescue efforts, he was pronounced dead at the scene. The subsequent investigation revealed that he had taken his own life, unable to cope with the public reaction and his growing guilt over his actions. News of Sebastian's suicide shocked the community. While some expressed relief that the scandal had come to an end, others mourned the tragic loss of a man who, despite his grave misconduct, had succumbed to a spiral of despair. Conversations on social media and in the press grew even more complex, blending debates about individual accountability, media pressure, and the systemic issues that had led to this tragedy. For Tomás, the news came as a profound shock. Though Sebastian's tragic end did not change the impact of the incident or the urgent need for justice, Tomás found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. Sebastian's death did not erase the abuses of power or the necessity for systemic reform. With the support of his father and his team, Tomás resolved to continue the fight. He was determined to ensure the incident served as a catalyst for meaningful change and to honor the dignity of those who had suffered. Tomás's pursuit of justice persisted, transforming personal tragedy into an urgent call for action and systemic reform.